The storm outside matched the one brewing in my gut as I stared at Ivy's text message. Girls' night running late. Don't wait up. At 45, I'd learned to read between the lines of my 27-year-old wife's messages like a contractor reads blueprints, carefully because one missed detail could bring the whole damn thing crashing down. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. My name's Darren Locke, and I've been painting houses in this godforsaken upstate New York town for 23 years. Paint under my fingernails, ache in my lower back, and apparently a cheating wife who thinks I'm too stupid to notice when her girls' nights started happening 3 times a week. The leftover lasagna sat cold on the kitchen counter. Ivy had barely touched her portion before declaring she needed to live a little and storming out in that red dress that cost more than I make in a week. I figured I'd take the food to Caleb, my 23-year-old son from my first marriage. Kid worked at the warehouse, lived in some crappy apartment complex on the east side, and probably hadn't eaten a decent meal in days. The drive through the slush-covered streets gave me time to think. Ivy had been different lately, distant, secretive, always on her phone. When I'd ask about her day at the bar where she worked, she'd give me one-word answers and that look. You know the one. The look that says, "You're too old to understand my life, Darren." Well, maybe she was right. Maybe I didn't understand why a beautiful young woman would marry a paint-splattered middle-aged guy like me. But I was about to get an education. Caleb's apartment building looked like something from a horror movie, peeling paint, broken security door, the smell of garbage, and broken dreams. I climbed to the 3rd floor, balancing the lasagna container and my growing unease. Something felt wrong. The hallway was too quiet, and there was music coming from Caleb's unit. Soft music. The kind you don't play when you're eating alone. I knocked. No answer. Knocked again. Harder. "Caleb? It's Dad. Brought you some food." Footsteps. Whispered voices. My stomach dropped like a stone down a well. The door cracked open, and there was my son. Shirtless, sweaty, his face the color of old paint. Behind him, barely visible in the dim light, I caught a flash of red fabric I'd seen leave my house 3 hours ago. "Dad, this isn't..." I pushed past him into the apartment, and there she was, my wife, my beautiful, lying, cheating wife, sitting on my son's couch in nothing but her red dress hiked up to her thighs and guilt written across her face like graffiti on a wall. For a moment, nobody moved, nobody breathed. The only sound was that damn soft music. Ivy's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. "Darren, I can explain." "No need." My voice came out steady, which surprised me. Inside, I was screaming. Inside, I was fading. But outside, I was cold as January concrete. I can see exactly what's going on here. I set the lasagna container on the nearest table with deliberate care. "Enjoy your dinner, both of you." Then I walked out, leaving them frozen in their guilt and shame. I didn't slam the door, didn't yell, didn't throw punches. I just left, because sometimes the quietest exit makes the loudest statement. But as I drove home through the storm, one thought kept echoing in my head like a prayer. They have no idea what they've just unleashed. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat in my kitchen, drinking coffee and planning. By sunrise, I had 3 pages of notes and a clarity I hadn't felt in months. Ivy thought she was dealing with some dumb, heartbroken husband who'd back down and accept it. She was about to learn that 23 years in construction teaches you how to build things, and how to tear them down. First things first. Evidence. I'd been suspicious for weeks, and now I knew why. Time to prove it. My neighbor, Mrs. Dorsey, was already in her garden when I stepped outside at 7 a.m. The old bat saw everything that happened on our street. Everything. "Morning, Mrs. Dorsey. Hell of a storm last night." She looked up from her roses, eyes bright with curiosity. "Indeed it was, Darren. Ivy get home safe? I saw her leave in that red dress around 6, but I don't think I heard her car come back." "Bingo. What time did you turn in?" "Oh, I was up until midnight watching my stories. That red Camaro of hers is pretty loud, you know. Hard to miss." I thanked her and went back inside, adding, "Neighbor confirms Ivy didn't come home," to my growing list. Next stop, our phone records. Ivy might be young and pretty, but she wasn't tech-savvy. She'd left our account passwords on the kitchen computer, probably figuring I was too much of a dinosaur to know how to use them. Wrong again, sweetheart. 2 hours later, I had printouts of 3 months' worth of text messages and call logs. The evidence painted a picture uglier than a botched paint job. Messages to Caleb starting innocent. "How are you doing, sweetie?" And escalating to things that made my stomach turn. My wife, my son. planning their little meetings while I was out working to pay for the roof over their heads. The worst part? They'd been laughing about me, calling me the old man, joking about how I fell asleep watching TV, how I didn't satisfy Ivy anymore, how Caleb was so much more fun than his boring father. I printed everything, every message, every call log, every piece of evidence that would hang them both in divorce court and the court of public opinion. By noon, I was sitting in my lawyer's office. "Jesus, Darren," Gary Hoffman said, flipping through the evidence. Gary had handled my first divorce 15 years ago, and he knew how to play hardball. "This is brutal, but it's also ironclad. She won't get a penny." "That's just the beginning," I told him. "File the papers today. And Gary, I want her served publicly, at the bar where she works, during the lunch rush." Gary raised an eyebrow. "That's vindictive. That's justice." I left his office and drove to the bank. Ivy's name was on our joint checking account, but the savings account, the one with $38,000, was in my name only, a remnant from my paranoid first marriage that was about to pay dividends. "I'd like to transfer these funds to a new account," I told the teller, sliding the paperwork across the counter, "and I need to remove someone from this joint account." 30 minutes later, Ivy's access to our money was gone. Her credit cards, all tied to accounts in my name, would start declining by evening. The house was mine. I'd bought it before we married and never added her name to the deed. Smart move, past Darren. But I wasn't done, not by a long shot. My next stop was Murphy's Bar, where Ivy worked and where half the town gathered to drink and gossip. I didn't go inside. Instead, I sat in my truck across the street, watching through the windows as Ivy served drinks and laughed with customers. She looked happy, carefree, like she didn't have a worry in the world. That was about to change. My phone buzzed. A text from Caleb. "Dad, please call me. We need to talk." I deleted it without responding. Then I drove to the hardware store and bought the biggest, brightest padlock they had. If Ivy wanted to play games, she'd learn that I knew how to play too. When I got home, I changed every lock in the house. Front door, back door, garage, even the shed where I kept my painting equipment. Then I sat on my front porch, drinking a beer and waiting. Ivy's red Camaro pulled into the driveway at 6:30 p.m., right on schedule. She bounced out of the car like she owned the world, fumbling with her keys as she approached the front door. I watched her try the lock once, twice, 3 times, watched the confusion cross her face, then the anger. She turned and saw me sitting on the porch, and her expression shifted to something between fury and fear. "Darren, what the hell? Why won't my key work?" "Because I changed the locks." "You can't do that. This is my house too." I took a slow sip of my beer, savoring the moment. "Actually, it's not. Check the deed. Your name's not on it." She stormed up the porch steps, her face red with rage. "You can't lock me out of my own home. Watch me." "This is about last night, isn't it?" "Darren, I can explain." "No need for explanations, Ivy. I saw everything I needed to see. You and my son playing house while I was working to pay for your lifestyle." Her mouth fell open. For the first time since I'd known her, Ivy was speechless. I stood up, finishing my beer. "Your clothes are in garbage bags on the back porch. Your car's still in your name, so you can keep it. But everything else, everything I paid for, that stays here." "You bastard! You can't do this to me." "I just did." I walked toward the front door, then paused. "Oh, and Ivy, you might want to check your credit cards. And your bank account. Funny how quickly things can change when you're not paying attention." I went inside and locked the door behind me, leaving her screaming on the porch like a wet cat. Through the window, I watched her race to her car and speed away, probably heading straight to Caleb's apartment. Let them comfort each other. They were going to need it. Because tomorrow, the real fun would begin. The next morning brought the kind of satisfaction that comes from a job well done. I was sipping coffee and reading the paper when my phone started buzzing. Text after text from Ivy, each one more desperate than the last. "Darren, please, we need to talk. You can't just throw me out. I'm sorry about what you saw, but it's not what you think. Answer your damn phone." I deleted them all without reading past the first few words. Then I drove to my job site, whistling for the first time in months. My work crew was already set up when I arrived. Gary Martinez and his kid Tommy, both good painters and better friends. We were finishing the exterior on a Victorian house downtown, the kind of detailed work that required steady hands and patience. "You're in a good mood," Gary observed as I mixed paint. "Win the lottery?" "Something like that." I told them about Ivy and Caleb, watching their faces shift from shock to disgust to something like admiration. "Damn, Darren," Tommy said. "Your own son? That's cold." "Gets colder," I replied, loading my brush. "I'm just getting started." Gary, who'd been married 40 years and survived his own share of drama, nodded approvingly. What's your next move? Public humiliation. Tonight, Murphy's bar. Ivy works the evening shift and half the town drinks there. Time to let everyone know what kind of woman they've been serving them drinks. You sure about this? Gary asked. Once you cross that line, there's no going back. I looked at him, thinking about my wife in my son's arms, about the text messages calling me the old man, about years of working 60-hour weeks to keep her happy while she was planning to betray me. I crossed that line the moment I walked into Caleb's apartment. Now I'm just evening the score. We worked in comfortable silence for a while, the rhythm of brushstrokes and the smell of fresh paint calming my nerves. This was my world. Honest work, visible results, problems you could solve with skill and effort. Not like marriage, where you could do everything right and still get screwed. Around noon, my phone rang. Unknown number. Mr. Locke, this is Jennifer Walsh from Walsh & Associates. I'm calling on behalf of your wife, Ivy Locke. She'd like to discuss a reconciliation. I laughed out loud. Tell my wife, my soon-to-be ex-wife, that if she wants to discuss anything, she can talk to my lawyer, Gary Hoffman. She knows the number. Sir, perhaps we could... Lady, the only thing Ivy and I need to discuss is how fast she can sign the divorce papers. Good day. I hung up and went back to painting, but my good mood was fading. Ivy was lawyering up, which meant she planned to fight. Fine. I had better lawyers and better evidence, but it also meant I needed to accelerate my timeline. At 5 p.m., I cleaned my brushes and headed home to shower and change. Tonight was going to be a performance, and I wanted to look the part. Clean jeans, button-down shirt, work boots polished to a shine, the respectable, wronged husband, the victim who refused to stay down. Murphy's bar sat on Main Street like an old dog on a porch, weathered, comfortable, and full of stories. I'd been drinking there since I was 21, back when Murphy himself ran the place. Now his daughter Kate owned it, and she'd kept the same dark wood, neon beer signs, and atmosphere of friendly gossip that made it the unofficial town hall. I arrived at 7 p.m. during the after-work rush. The place was packed with construction workers, shop owners, and retirees nursing beers and solving the world's problems. Perfect. Ivy was behind the bar, her blonde hair pulled back in a ponytail, wearing the black Murphy's t-shirt that hugged her curves just right. She looked beautiful and confident, laughing with customers like she didn't have a care in the world, like she hadn't just destroyed 2 families. She saw me the moment I walked in. Her smile faltered, and she whispered something to Kate, who glanced my way with concern. I nodded politely and took a seat at the far end of the bar, in the corner where everyone could see me, but I had a clear view of the room. What can I get you, Darren? Kate asked, approaching cautiously. Budweiser. And Kate, make sure everyone knows I'm buying the first round for anyone who wants to hear a story. Kate's eyes widened, but she grabbed a beer and set it in front of me. Word spread quickly in a place like Murphy's. Within minutes, I had a small crowd gathered around my corner of the bar. Appreciate you all coming over, I said, loud enough for the whole bar to hear. I've got something to share, and I figure you should hear it from me before the gossip mill gets hold of it. The bar grew quiet. Even the jukebox seemed to lower its volume. Yesterday, I discovered that my wife has been having an affair. I paused, letting that sink in. With my son. The silence was deafening. Then the whispers started, rippling through the crowd like waves. That's right, I continued, my voice steady and clear. My 27-year-old wife has been sleeping with my 23-year-old son, in his apartment, while I was working 60-hour weeks to pay for her lifestyle. I reached into my jacket and pulled out a manila envelope. I've got text messages, call logs, and witness statements. Anyone who thinks I'm lying is welcome to take a look. Ivy had gone pale behind the bar. She was gripping a glass so tight I thought it might shatter. Now, I know some of you might think this is between me and them, I said, standing up so everyone could see me. But when someone betrays their family, betrays the trust of everyone who cared about them, that becomes everyone's business. Because if they'll do it to family, they'll do it to anyone. I finished my beer in one long pull and set the empty bottle on the bar with a sharp crack. Ivy, you wanted excitement. You wanted to live a little. Well, congratulations. Now everyone knows exactly how you've been living. The crowd parted as I walked toward the door. Behind me, I could hear the explosion of voices, the shocked exclamations, the demands for details. Ivy was crying now, but I didn't look back. I'd lit the fuse. Now I just had to wait for the explosion. The explosion came faster than I expected. By the next morning, my phone was ringing off the hook. Friends, coworkers, even people I barely knew were calling to express their shock, their support, and their hunger for more details. The story had spread through town like wildfire, growing more scandalous with each retelling. But the most important call came from Gary Hoffman. "Darren, you magnificent bastard," he said, his voice full of admiration. "Ivy's lawyer called this morning. They want to settle fast." "How fast?" "They're offering to waive any claim to marital assets in exchange for you keeping the details out of the court record. Apparently, Ivy's getting some unwanted attention at work and around town." I leaned back in my kitchen chair, savoring the moment. "Tell them no deal. I want this in the public record. I want everyone to know exactly what kind of people they are." "Darren, they're offering you everything you want." "Not everything. I want them to suffer like they made me suffer. I want their names attached to this betrayal forever." There was a pause. "You sure about this? Revenge has a way of consuming people." "I'm already consumed, Gary. Might as well make it count." After hanging up, I drove to my job site, but my heart wasn't in the work. My crew could see I was distracted, and Gary Martinez finally pulled me aside. "Boss, maybe you should take the day off. You're wound tighter than a paint can lid." He was right. I needed to channel this energy into something productive, something that would advance my cause. I decided to pay a visit to Caleb's workplace. The warehouse sat on the industrial side of town, a sprawling concrete building where my son loaded trucks for 40 hours a week. I'd been proud of him for getting the job, for trying to build something for himself. Now that pride had curdled into something darker. I found him on his lunch break, sitting alone in the parking lot eating a sandwich from a brown bag. He looked like hell, unshaven, hollow-eyed, wearing yesterday's clothes. "Good." "Hello, son." He looked up, startled, and nearly choked on his sandwich. "Dad, what are you doing here?" "Thought we should have a talk, man to man." Caleb stood up, trying to look taller than his guilt would allow. "Dead, about what you saw." What I saw was my son betraying everything I taught him about family, loyalty, and respect. I stepped closer, using my height advantage. What I saw was a coward who couldn't find his own woman, so he stole his father's. It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that. I grabbed his sandwich and threw it in the nearest dumpster. You want to know what it was like? It was like watching my own son drive a knife into my back and twist it. Tears were running down his face now. "Dad, please, I'm sorry. I never meant for you to find out." "You're not sorry you did it. You're sorry you got caught." I leaned in close, my voice dropping to a whisper. "And you're going to be a lot sorrier before this is over." I turned to leave, then paused. "Oh, and Caleb? You might want to update your resume. Word has a way of getting around about people who can't be trusted." I left him standing in the parking lot, crying like the child he'd never stopped being. My next stop was the bank, where I had some financial housekeeping to take care of. The savings account I'd emptied was just the beginning. Ivy had been using my credit cards for months, running up bills on clothes, dinners, and hotel rooms where she'd been meeting my son. Time to cut off that gravy train permanently. "I need to cancel these cards immediately," I told the customer service representative, sliding a stack of plastic across her desk. "Unauthorized use." "Of course, Mr. Locke. We'll need you to file a fraud report. Already done. My lawyer has all the documentation." Within an hour, every credit card tied to my name was canceled. Ivy's shopping sprees were over, but I wasn't done. I drove to the cell phone store and canceled the line I'd been paying for Ivy's phone. Let her figure out how to stay in touch with her lover boy without my help. The young clerk looked uncomfortable as he processed the cancellation. "Sir, this will cut off service immediately." "Are you sure?" "Son, I've never been more sure of anything in my life." As I left the store, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, probably Ivy borrowing someone else's phone. "You're destroying my life. I have nothing left." I typed back, "Now you know how it feels." The response came immediately. "Please, Darren, I'll do anything. Just stop this." "Too late for that. You made your choice. Now live with it." I blocked the number and drove home, feeling lighter than I had in months. But as I pulled into my driveway, I saw something that made me freeze. Someone had spray-painted "asshole" across my garage door in bright red letters. I sat in my truck, staring at the graffiti, feeling my carefully controlled anger start to slip. They wanted to play dirty? Fine. I'd show them what dirty really looked like. I walked to my shed, grabbed a can of white primer, and painted over the graffiti. Then I took out my phone and called Kate at Murphy's Bar. "Kate, it's Darren Locke. I need to ask you something. Has Ivy been at work today?" She called in sick, said she wasn't feeling well. I'll bet she didn't. "Listen, Kate, I know this puts you in a tough spot, but you should know. Ivy's been stealing from the register. I've got bank records showing deposits that don't match her declared tips." It was a lie, but Kate didn't know that. and given what everyone now knew about Ivy's character, it was a believable lie. Jesus, Darren, are you sure? Check your books. I think you'll find some discrepancies. I hung up, knowing that Ivy's job was now in jeopardy along with everything else. Maybe it was cruel. Maybe it was overkill. But she'd started this war when she decided to betray me with my own son. As the sun set over my quiet neighborhood, I sat on my front porch with a beer, admiring my handiwork. The garage door looked good as new. Clean, fresh, like the slate I was wiping clean in my own life. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities for justice. But tonight, I was content to sit in the gathering darkness, planning my next move in the chess game that my marriage had become. And I was winning. 3 days later, the divorce papers were signed, sealed, and delivered. Ivy got nothing. No alimony, no property settlement, no claim to anything I'd worked for during our marriage. She'd also lost her job at Murphy's bar after Kate discovered some irregularities in the cash register receipts, and Caleb had been mysteriously laid off from the warehouse after his supervisor received an anonymous tip about his unreliable character. I should have felt satisfied. Victory was mine on every front. But something was still eating at me, a hunger that wouldn't be satisfied by legal victories and financial ruin. I needed to see them face to face one more time. I needed to look them in the eye and let them know that this was far from over. The opportunity came sooner than expected. I was painting the trim on a house downtown when I spotted them across the street at the diner, Ivy and Caleb, huddled together in a corner booth like conspirators planning their next move. They looked desperate, defeated, but they were still together, still united against me. That's when the final piece of my plan clicked into place. I finished my work for the day and drove home, but instead of going inside, I sat in my truck and made a phone call to Rita Sanchez, Ivy's best friend and partner in crime. Rita had been covering for Ivy's affair, providing alibis and encouragement. Time to settle that score, too. Rita, it's Darren Locke. We need to talk. Darren, I don't think that's a good idea. Murphy's bar. 1 hour. Come alone, or I start sharing some interesting photos I found on Ivy's phone. I didn't have any photos, but Rita didn't know that. Fear was a powerful motivator, and Rita had plenty to be afraid of. She was married to a jealous man who wouldn't appreciate learning about her role in encouraging his wife's friends to cheat. An hour later, Rita slid into the booth across from me at Murphy's, her face pale and drawn. The bar was nearly empty. The dinner crowd hadn't arrived yet, and the afternoon drinkers had gone home to their families. What do you want, Darren? I want you to deliver a message to Ivy and Caleb. Tell them I'm done playing games. Tell them I want to meet with them tonight at my house to settle this once and for all. Why would they agree to that? I leaned forward, my voice dropping to a whisper. Because if they don't, I'm going to make sure everyone in this town knows about your husband's gambling problem, your affair with your neighbor, and the little drug habit you think nobody knows about. Rita's eyes went wide. How did you? I've been doing my homework, Rita. Amazing what you can learn when you start paying attention. Now, are you going to deliver my message, or do I need to start making phone calls? She nodded quickly, gathering her purse. What time? 8 o'clock. And Rita? Tell them to come prepared to listen, not talk. I've got some things to say, and they're going to hear every word. After Rita left, I sat alone in the bar, nursing a beer and going over my plan one more time. Everything had to be perfect. This was my final play, the move that would end the game once and for all. At 7:30, I was home, waiting in my living room with all the lights on and the curtains open. I wanted the neighbors to see everything that was about to happen. Witnesses were important for what came next. Ivy's red Camaro pulled into my driveway at exactly 8 o'clock, followed by Caleb's beat-up Honda. They sat in their cars for a few minutes, probably working up the courage to face me. Finally, they got out and walked to my front door together, holding hands like teenagers on a first date. I opened the door before they could knock. Come in, we have a lot to discuss. They followed me into the living room, both of them looking around nervously like they expected a trap. They weren't wrong. Sit down, I said, gesturing to the couch. Both of you. They sat, still holding hands, still presenting a united front. That was about to change. I've been thinking about what you two did to me. I began, pacing in front of them like a lawyer addressing a jury. The betrayal, the lies, the complete destruction of everything I thought I knew about my family. Dad, Caleb started, but I held up a hand to silence him. I'm talking. You're listening. For once in your miserable lives, you're going to hear some truth. I walked to the mantel and picked up a manila envelope, thick with papers. Do you know what this is? This is 3 months of detective work. Phone records, credit card statements, witness statements, photographs. Everything you two have been doing, documented and verified. Ivy had gone pale. Darren, please. I said I'm talking. My voice echoed through the house, loud enough for Mrs. Dorsey next door to hear every word. This envelope contains enough evidence to destroy both of your reputations permanently. But that's not what I want to talk about. I set the envelope back on the mantel and turned to face them. What I want to talk about is consequences. Real consequences. The kind that last a lifetime. We know we hurt you, Ivy said, tears streaming down her face. We're sorry. We never meant... You're sorry you got caught. There's a difference. I walked closer, looming over them on the couch. But here's what you don't understand. This isn't about hurt feelings or broken hearts. This is about justice. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a small digital recorder, setting it on the coffee table in front of them. I want you both to confess, out loud, on the record. I want you to admit what you did, when you did it, and how long you've been planning to make a fool out of me. We're not doing that, Caleb said, finding his voice for the first time. You can't make us. Can't I? I smiled, the expression feeling foreign on my face. Caleb, do you know what happens when word gets out that you can't be trusted? In a town this size, you'll never work again. Ever. I turned to Ivy. And you, sweetheart. Do you know what happens to homewreckers in small towns, especially ones who target their own family members? You'll be lucky if anyone speaks to you again, let alone hires you. You're bluffing, Ivy said, but her voice was shaking. Am I? I picked up the envelope again, because I've got copies of this evidence ready to go to the newspaper, the radio station, and every social media platform in town. By tomorrow morning, everyone will know exactly what kind of people you are. The room fell silent except for the ticking of the old grandfather clock in the corner. Ivy and Caleb looked at each other, communicating in the wordless way that lovers do. Finally, Ivy nodded. What do you want us to say? I pressed record on the device and sat back in my chair, finally relaxed for the first time in days. Start with the truth. All of it. When it started, how long it's been going on, and what you really think of the man whose life you destroyed. For the next 20 minutes, they talked. They confessed everything. The first time they'd been alone together, the gradual escalation from innocent flirtation to full-blown affair, the lies they'd told, and the plans they'd made. They talked about how they'd laughed about me, called me names, made jokes about my age and my trusting nature. By the time they finished, I had everything I needed to destroy them completely, but I wasn't done yet. There's one more thing, I said, stopping the recorder. I want you both to leave town, tonight. Pack your things and go somewhere far away, where nobody knows your names or your history. You can't make us leave, Caleb protested. This is our home, too. No, it's not. Not anymore. I stood up, walking to the window that faced Mrs. Dorsey's house. Because if you're still here tomorrow, this recording goes public. Along with everything else I've collected. I turned back to face them, my expression harder than concrete. But if you leave tonight, if you disappear and never come back, I'll keep your secrets. You can start over somewhere else, build new lives, pretend this never happened. And if we don't, Ivy asked, then I'll make sure everyone knows exactly who you are and what you've done. Your names will be poison in this town. Your children, if you ever have any, will grow up knowing their parents are the kind of people who destroy families for fun. I walked to the front door and opened it. You have 1 hour to decide. After that, the offer expires. They left without another word, driving away into the night like the cowards they'd always been. I stood in my doorway, watching their taillights disappear around the corner, and felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Peace. An hour later, my phone rang. It was Ivy, calling from a number I didn't recognize. We're leaving, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Tonight. We won't be back. Smart choice. Darren, for what it's worth, I really am sorry. I never meant for things to go this far. I looked around my empty house at the life I'd built and they'd tried to destroy and smiled. No, you're not sorry, but you will be. Every day for the rest of your life, you'll remember what you gave up for a few months of excitement. You'll remember the man who loved you enough to give you everything and how you threw it all away for nothing. I hung up the phone and walked to my kitchen, where I poured myself 3 fingers of whiskey and raised the glass in a toast to my empty house. To new beginnings, I said aloud, and to making sure the guilty pay for their crimes. Outside, snow was beginning to fall, covering the town in a blanket of white that made everything look clean and new. Tomorrow would bring fresh challenges, new opportunities, maybe even a chance at happiness with someone who understood the value of loyalty and trust. But tonight, justice had been served. Tonight, the underdog had won. And that was enough.